My boyfriend texted, "I'll be staying at Beatrice's tonight, don't wait up." I replied, "Thanks for letting me know." Then I packed his entire life in boxes and left them at her door. His 3 a.m. panic call was just the beginning. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. My name is Audrey, and I want to tell you a story. It's a story about how my entire life, a life I thought was perfect, fell apart and was rebuilt in the space of about a week. If you had met me just a little while ago, you would have seen a woman who believed she had it all figured out. I'm 25 years old. I have a steady career in software design that I worked hard for, a cozy apartment that was my own little sanctuary, and a boyfriend I thought I was going to marry. His name was Spencer. For 2 years, Spencer was my world. He had this boyish grin that could just melt away a bad day. He was the kind of charming that snuck up on you. We met through mutual friends, at a backyard barbecue one summer. I remember he spent an hour talking to me about my passion for vintage science fiction novels, asking questions, seeming genuinely fascinated. He made you feel like you were the only person in the room. I was completely smitten. Our first few years were, well, they were good. We took a road trip up the coast one fall, singing along to terrible 90s music, stopping at every little roadside diner. He remembered the little things, like how I took my coffee or my favorite kind of flower. And for a long, long time, I thought his presence in my life was fate. About 8 months before everything happened, he moved into my apartment. It felt like the natural next step, you know? We were serious. We were building a future. He'd been laid off from his marketing job a couple of months before that. It was a tough blow to his ego, I could tell. He was trying to get a new consulting venture off the ground, and he promised he'd start saving for the future, for our future, as soon as things took off. He'd sit at the kitchen table with his laptop, drawing up business plans and talking about the massive potential. So, I told him not to worry. "We're a team," I'd said, rubbing his shoulders while he stared at spreadsheets. "My salary can cover us for a while. You focus on building your dream." And I meant it. I covered the rent. The utilities, the groceries, all of it. I really didn't mind. I loved him, and I believed in him. I saw it as an investment in the life we were building together. I would come home from my own long day at the office and make dinner while he was on important calls. I'd pay the credit card bill at the end of the month, seeing his lunches and coffees on the statement, and tell myself it was a business expense, part of the networking he had to do. But lately, something had shifted. It was a subtle change, the kind you almost convince yourself you're imagining because the alternative is too painful to consider. The ambitious energy he'd had at the beginning had curdled into something else, something listless and secretive. Spencer was supposedly working late all the time, glued to his laptop in our spare room, but he never seemed to have much to show for it. There were no new clients, no progress he could explain to me. When I'd ask how his day was, it was all just vague talk about networking and getting things lined up. And then there was his phone. For the longest time, his phone was just a piece of technology. He'd leave it on the coffee table, on the kitchen counter, face up, without a second thought. But over the last few months, it had become an extension of his hand. It was always with him. Always face down. And always password locked. I remember one evening, a few weeks before the end, I was cleaning up after dinner. He'd left his phone on the counter and I picked it up to wipe underneath it. The way he flinched, spinning around from the sink, his eyes wide with panic, it was like I'd picked up a venomous snake. "I got it," he said, snatching it from my hand with a forced, tight smile. He never left it out again. I tried to shake the unease off. I really did. I told myself I was being paranoid, that his stress about work was making him jumpy. That love means trust. But it's hard to trust when the person you love starts building invisible walls around himself, brick by invisible brick. I remember something my dad told me once. He passed away a few years ago from a sudden heart attack, and the grief still hits me at the oddest times. He was a man of few words, but he was my rock. He left me a small inheritance, enough to help with the down payment on this very apartment, and I've always felt his presence here. When I was 17, I was crying my eyes out over my first high school heartbreak. The boy had cheated on me. My dad didn't give me platitudes or tell me there were other fish in the sea. He just sat down next to me on my bed, put a firm, steadying hand on my shoulder, and said, "Audrey, a man who hides his phone is already gone in spirit. Don't you ever beg someone to stay when they've already left you." Back then, I think I rolled my eyes. It sounded so dramatic. But now, sitting in my apartment, feeling that knot of suspicion tighten in my stomach every night Spencer came home late smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't mine, his words felt less like advice and more like a prophecy. Then came the message. It was a Tuesday night. I'd had a good day at work, one of those rare days where every line of code just worked. I came home feeling optimistic. I decided to make one of Spencer's favorite meals, pasta with a slow-cooked bolognese sauce. I had the music on, a glass of wine poured, and the whole apartment smelled of garlic and oregano and simmering tomatoes. It was one of those simple, domestic moments that I used to cherish. Around 7:30, my phone buzzed on the counter. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, smiling. I honestly thought it would be Spencer, telling me he was finally on his way home and that he was excited for dinner. I picked it up. My smile faded as I read the name. Spencer. My heart gave a hopeful little flutter. I opened the text. And then the world tilted on its axis. The message wasn't long. It wasn't even cruel, not on the surface. But it shattered my world in 11 simple words. It read, "Staying at Beatrice'S tonight. Don't wait up. Beatrice." His co-worker. The same Beatrice whose Instagram photos he liked at 2 o'clock in the morning, a stream of hearts on pictures of her in cocktails, dresses, and on weekend trips. The same Beatrice who always laughed a little too loud, a little too long, at his jokes during office parties, touching his arm as she did. The same Beatrice he swore up and down was just a friend, and that I was being crazy for ever questioning it. My pulse, which had been humming along with the rhythm of my evening, slowed to a crawl. I could feel the blood drain from my face. I stood there, in my warm, fragrant kitchen, staring at the glowing screen of my phone. The sauce on the stove started to bubble too furiously, threatening to burn at the bottom of the pot, but I didn't notice. It felt like I was watching a scene from someone else's life. A movie about a woman whose heart was breaking and she didn't even know it yet. My first instinct, for a fleeting second, was disbelief. My brain scrambled for a logical, innocent explanation. Maybe it was a work thing. A late project. Maybe her power was out and he was just being a good friend, helping her on a deadline. Maybe. But my second instinct, the one that whispered from that deep, honest place in my gut, told me the truth. It was a truth I had probably known for months but had refused to acknowledge. He had made a choice. And it wasn't me. He hadn't even bothered to lie this time. He just stated it as a fact. My fingers felt like they were made of lead, they were numb and cold, but they still moved. I typed back a reply. My hands were trembling, but my message was calm. Deliberately so. "Thanks for letting me know." That was it. No questions. No accusations. No screaming "Where are you" in all caps. Just 5 words that sealed his fate. I pressed send. I stood there in my kitchen for what felt like an eternity, staring at the skillet on the stove. I'd forgotten about the vegetables I was sautéing to go with the pasta. The onions were black now, and a thin curl of bitter smoke was stinging my eyes. Or maybe that was something else. My chest should have been on fire with rage or shattered with heartbreak. I was waiting for the wave of pain to hit me, to knock me off my feet. But it didn't come. Instead, there was just this hollow calm. It was the kind of calm that comes after the hurricane has passed and all you can see is the wreckage. You're just numb. I remembered my father's words again, clear as day. A man who hides his phone is already gone in spirit. Spencer hadn't just left for the night. He'd been gone for months. I just hadn't been willing to see it. This text wasn't a confession, it was a formality. I reached over and turned off the stove. The burner clicked off with an air of finality. The bitter scent of burnt onions filled the room. I set down the spatula on the counter with a quiet, deliberate click. The weight of betrayal was immense, it pressed down on me, threatening to suffocate me. But beneath it, another feeling was starting to bloom. It was cold, precise, and almost surgical. It was resolve. If Spencer wanted Beatrice's bed, then that's where he could stay. Permanently. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the pan of burnt vegetables against the wall, though a part of me wanted to. Instead, I walked over to the hall closet, the one where I kept old boxes from when I moved in and from packages I'd received. I pulled out the first empty cardboard box I could find, a large one from a bookshelf I'd ordered. I carried it into the bedroom, our bedroom, and placed it on the bed we once shared, right on his side. And then, one neat fold at a time, I began to pack. The first shirt I folded was his favorite, an old gray hoodie, worn soft from years of use. It was the same hoodie he draped over my shoulders on our very first date. We had gone to see some indie movie, and afterwards we were walking home, talking about it, when a sudden summer downpour caught us off guard. We huddled under an awning, laughing, and I was shivering in my thin dress. He'd taken it off and wrapped it around me. It smelled like him, like clean laundry and some faint, woodsy cologne. For just a moment, my fingers lingered on the soft, worn fabric. The memory stung, sharp and quick, like lemon on a paper cut. Then, I pressed the hoodie flat, brutally smoothing out the memory with it. I placed it in the bottom of the box and reached for the next thing. This wasn't just packing clothes. This was an exorcism. I was dismantling a life. I was dismantling the lie I had been living for months, maybe longer. One box became 2, then 3. I worked with a strange, rhythmic efficiency that felt completely disconnected from my body. It was like watching someone else perform these tasks. My hands moved with purpose, pulling shirts from hangers, jeans from drawers. The motions soothed me. Shirt, fold, stack. Pants, fold, stack. It felt like with every crease I smoothed out, another corner of my heart was being ironed free from him. I was a machine, fueled by a quiet, cold fury. I cleared his side of the closet first. The suits he'd bought for interviews but rarely wore. The button-down shirts I'd ironed for him 100 times. The ridiculous collection of graphic t-shirts he refused to get rid of. All of it went into the boxes. Then I moved from the closet to the dresser. His cologne bottles stood there like little glass monuments to his lies. I remembered him telling me Beatrice had complimented his cologne once. At the time I thought it was sweet. Now it felt like a clue I'd missed. I wrapped each one carefully in bubble wrap, not to protect them, but because the methodical process of taping them up kept my hands from shaking. Into the box they went. Next, the bathroom. This felt like the biggest violation. It was our most shared, intimate space. His toothbrush, still damp in the ceramic holder next to mine. For a second, I had a visceral urge to snap it in half. Instead, I just dropped it into a Ziploc bag. His razor. The half-used bottle of aftershave he swore by. All of it was swept into a toiletry bag and tucked neatly into a corner of a suitcase. I even wound the cord of his electric razor with painstaking precision, as if my neatness could disguise the chaos raging inside me. I worked my way through the apartment, hunting for every last piece of him. His video game console by the TV, the tangle of wires behind it. I unplugged it all, coiling the cords neatly. the stack of games he'd bought with money from our joint account, an account that only my salary ever went into. His half-read books on the nightstand. His muddy sneakers by the front door. Nothing was spared. By midnight, the room was bare of him. It had taken 8 boxes, 2 large suitcases, and a duffel bag. His shoes, his ties, his laptop, even the silly mug he claimed his grandmother gave him, but I knew for a fact he'd bought at IKEA because I was with him when he did. I had packed every last trace. Nothing of Spencer remained. I even stripped his pillowcase off the pillow and took his towel from the bathroom hook. I would not sleep on his lies or dry myself with his deceit. I folded the pillowcase neatly, placed it on top of the final suitcase, and stood back. The apartment looked different without his clutter. It was bigger, cleaner, lighter. The air itself felt different, like a pressure I hadn't even realized was there had finally been released. I took a deep breath, and it felt like my own again. I glanced at the clock on the wall. 10:15 p.m. The decision formed in my mind like a lightning strike, clear and absolute. I wasn't going to let these boxes sit here, collecting dust in the corner like some sad shrine to what we used to have. He didn't deserve a place in my home, not even in box form. They didn't belong here anymore. They belonged where Spencer chose to be. My car keys were on the hook by the door. I grabbed them, and then I started the real work. Trip after trip, I hauled the heavy boxes down the 2 flights of stairs from my apartment. My muscles ached, my arms burned, and my breath came in ragged bursts in the cool night air, but I didn't stop. It was a punishment and a purification all at once. Each thud of a box landing in the trunk of my car felt like punctuation at the end of a sentence. This is over. The finality of it was exhilarating. By 10:45, the car was packed so full I could barely see out the back window. The suspension groaned under the weight of a 2-year relationship. By 11 o'clock, I was driving across town, my headlights slicing through the darkness. I didn't turn on the radio. I just drove in silence, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. I knew exactly where I was going. I'd dropped Spencer off at Beatrice's apartment complex once, months ago, for what he'd called a team-building meeting. I remember thinking the place looked a little too chic for a simple coworker's apartment. It was one of those modern brick buildings with manicured hedges and a fountain out front, the kind of place where people pretended they had it all together. As fate, or maybe just dumb luck, would have it, a pizza delivery guy was leaving the building just as I pulled up. He held the secure front door open for me, assuming the suitcase I was dragging was my own. I gave him a tight nod and slipped inside before the door could click shut. Her apartment was 3B. On the 3rd floor. Of course. I didn't take the elevator. I took the stairs. I wanted to feel the burn in my legs. I wanted the physical exertion to match the emotional effort. As I got to the 3rd floor landing, I could hear the faint thump of music from behind one of the doors. And then, I heard it clearly. Laughter. A woman's laugh, higher pitched than mine. Sharp and carefree. I didn't linger. I didn't need to. I knew. I didn't knock. I didn't make a sound. I just started stacking. One by one, I hauled every box, every suitcase, every last bag up those stairs and arranged them neatly against her doorframe. It took me 4 trips. I worked silently, methodically. I built a wall of his life right outside her door. 8 boxes, 2 suitcases, a shrine of betrayal. It was a monument to the end of my 2-year relationship. On the very top of the pile, right at eye level, I placed a single, folded note. I'd written it in the car before I went in. The message was simple. Spencer's belongings. He's yours now. Audrey. I took a step back, pulled out my phone, and snapped a photo. Not for spite. Not to post online. But for me. It was proof. Proof for myself that I had really done it, that I hadn't just screamed into a pillow or thrown a plate against the wall. I had taken control. As I walked away, my heart didn't race. It did the opposite. It slowed down, becoming calmer and steadier with each step I took away from that door. By the time I slid back into the driver's seat of my car, the silence inside me was so complete it was almost frightening. There was no anger, no sadness. Just nothing. Emptiness. I was home by 11:30. The apartment felt gloriously, beautifully empty. The first thing I did was search for 24-hour locksmith on my phone. By midnight, a friendly, tired-looking man named Gus was at my door, changing the locks. It cost me $180. It was worth every single penny. The sound of the new lock clicking into place was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of safety. The sound of a new beginning. But I wasn't done. The locks were just the physical barrier. I needed to build the digital ones, too. I sat on my sofa, the one that suddenly felt huge without him, and began the purge. I imagined I was a cybersecurity expert cleaning a system of a persistent virus. I updated the code on my electronic keypad. I went into our shared Netflix account, the one I paid for, and clicked sign out of all devices, then changed the password. No more free rides. I did the same for Spotify, for Hulu, for every single thing we shared. His digital ghost was being exorcised, one click at a time. Then, I opened my banking app. He had an emergency credit card linked to my account. He was supposed to use it for, well, emergencies. But lately, I'd noticed the daily charges from Starbucks, the lunches I knew he was having with his work friends, the video games from the online store. It was a slow, steady drain on my finances, another way he was taking from me without giving anything back. I navigated to the card management screen. A picture of the card popped up. I clicked the button. Cancel card. A small pop-up asked for a reason. I typed, no longer authorized user. It was done. A small, simple act, but it felt like I'd just unplugged a parasite. When it was all finished, when every last digital tie had been severed, I walked to the kitchen. I saw the pot of ruined bolognese on the stove and the pan of charred vegetables. I scraped it all into the trash without a second thought. I opened the bottle of red wine we'd been saving for a special occasion. I guess this counted. I poured myself a large glass, sat back down on the sofa, and pressed play on a historical drama he always complained was too boring. At exactly 11:47 p.m., the first call came. The screen lit up with his name, Spencer. I looked at it, took a sip of wine, and let it go to voicemail. At 11:49, the second call. I ignored that one, too. By midnight, the texts began pouring in. I picked up the phone and read the first few. Audrey, what is this? Where are my things? Beatrice is freaking out. This isn't funny. Answer me. I placed the phone face down on the coffee table. The vibrations against the wood were a frantic, desperate rhythm. I let it buzz itself into exhaustion. Across town, the boxes he once called his home were now stacked neatly outside someone else's door. And here, in my quiet, clean, blessedly empty apartment, for the first time in months, I felt free. By 12:30 a.m., the buzzing hadn't stopped. My phone was lit up like a fire alarm, calls, texts, voicemails stacking one on top of the other. It was a digital tantrum. I flipped it over out of a morbid sense of curiosity. It was a waterfall of panic. Audrey, I'm serious. What the hell is going on? Beatrice's neighbors are complaining about the boxes. Pick up the phone. You can't just do this. My laptop is in one of those boxes. My whole life is in there. Your whole life? I thought. What about mine? I didn't respond. At 1 a.m., my doorbell rang. A sharp, insistent buzz that cut through the silence of my apartment. Then it rang again. And again. It was followed by the sound of fists hammering against the wood, rattling the entire frame. "Audrey!" Spencer's voice echoed through the hallway, muffled by the door but still dripping with an anger that was quickly turning into desperation. "Open the damn door! You're being insane! Let me in!" I got up from the sofa and walked to the door, my wineglass still in hand. I looked through the peephole. His face was distorted by the lens, his features twisted in a mask of fury. I leaned against the wall beside the door, my arms folded, just listening. I could see through the peephole that lights in my neighbors' apartments were starting to flick on. A petty part of me, a part one wasn't proud of but was definitely there, considered letting him shout until the whole building learned what kind of man he really was. Let them see the charming Spencer unravel. Instead, I unlocked my phone and sent him a single text message. "You chose to stay at Beatrice's. I simply helped you move." The hammering stopped. Silence. For about 10 minutes, there was nothing. I thought, maybe, he'd finally gotten the message and left. Then my phone buzzed again. It was another text from him. "You are going to regret this." A threat. How predictable. At 3 a.m., a different number appeared on my screen. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I had a feeling I knew who it was. He was probably borrowing Beatrice's phone. Against my better judgment, I answered, but I didn't say anything. I just waited. "Audrey?" Spencer's voice cracked. It was stripped of the anger now, replaced with a shaky, pleading tone I hadn't heard in years. "It's me. You have to listen. Nothing happened. I swear." I fell asleep on her couch. We were working. I almost laughed. "Nothing happened?" I asked, my voice soft, which I think unnerved him more than if I had screamed. "Then why were you at Beatrice's apartment, Spencer? On her couch? Why her apartment and not your own?" "It was just one night." "For work," he stammered, the lie sounding flimsy even to his own ears. "We were finishing a presentation. It got late, and she said I could just crash on the couch." It was innocent. "For work," I echoed, and this time a bitter laugh did escape. "Spencer, there are hotels. There are late-night diners. There are Ubers to take you back to your own bed. Don't insult my intelligence on top of everything else. Don't you dare." There was a pause on the line. I could hear him breathing, could almost picture him running a hand through his hair in frustration. Then his tone shifted again, this time to pure, pathetic pleading. "Where am I supposed to go now? My keys don't work. All my stuff is in the hallway of her building." I closed my eyes, the wine from earlier still warm in my veins. I thought about his question. I thought about him standing out in the cold, locked out of a life he had thrown away. And I felt nothing. No pity. No remorse. Just a profound sense of finality. "Where you stayed last night seems like the obvious answer," I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. The silence that followed was heavier than shouting. I could feel his shock, his disbelief that I wasn't going to break down, that I wasn't going to cry and beg and finally let him back in. He was used to me being his safety net. The net was gone. I ended the call before he could speak again. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter than I had in months. The sun was streaming through my windows, and for the first time, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt peaceful. I made coffee and sat by the window, actually enjoying it. Around 8:30 a.m., my landlord, Mr. Henderson, called. "Audrey, good morning," he said, his voice cheerful. "Just confirming you had the locks changed last night? Got an alert from the system." "Yes, I did, Mr. Henderson. I'm sorry for the late-night call to the service." He chuckled. Don't you worry about that. Figured something was up. Your boyfriend showed up at my office first thing this morning, looking like he'd slept in his car. Claimed it was all a big mistake and he'd lost his keys. Demanding a spare. Ex-boyfriend, I corrected him, the word feeling good on my tongue. Ex. Right. Well, he swore he was on the lease, said he had tenants' rights. He's not, I said firmly. Never has been. He never paid a dime of rent or signed any paperwork. His name is nowhere on that lease agreement, and you know it. I'd insisted on that from the beginning, a small act of self-preservation I was now incredibly grateful for. Good to know, my landlord said, a clear note of amusement in his tone. That's what I told him. He wasn't too happy about it. Don't you worry, I'll handle him if he comes back. You have a good day. But I knew Spencer wasn't finished. Men like him never go away that easily. And sure enough, by 9 a.m., the flying monkeys descended. His mother, Brenda, the queen bee of misplaced loyalty, was the first to attack. My phone rang, her name flashing on the screen. Against my instincts, I answered. I wanted this to be over, and that meant facing it head-on. How dare you, she snapped, without so much as a hello. Her voice was shrill with indignation. How dare you throw my son out onto the street like a piece of trash? I took a breath, holding the phone slightly away from my ear. Brenda, I said, my voice even. Your son texted me last night to say he was staying at another woman's house. I just helped him make that arrangement permanent. He made one mistake, she hissed. He told me everything. They were working, and he fell asleep. It was a mistake. And you ruin his life over it? No, I replied calmly, my patience wearing thin. He made a choice. And I respected it. This isn't about one mistake, Brenda, it's about a pattern of disrespect and lies. This was just the first time he got caught so carelessly. You are legally obligated to give him 30 days' notice. He's going to get a lawyer. You can't just evict him, she shouted, and I could tell Spencer had been feeding her bad legal advice. Wrong, I said, cutting her off. I spent an hour this morning on the phone with a legal aid service, Brenda, just to be sure. He never paid rent. He never signed the lease. Under the state's law, he was a long-term guest in my home. And a guest's invitation can be revoked at any time, for any reason. Guests don't get 30 days. You might want to tell your son's future lawyer that. You're heartless. He loves you. No, Brenda, I said, and a wave of clarity washed over me. He loves what I provide. A free place to live, a safety net, someone to clean up his messes. I'm finally done being his safety net. She hung up on me, but not before I heard the wavering edge in her voice, as if deep down, she knew exactly who her son was. She just didn't want to admit it. Just when I thought the morning's drama was over, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me when it rang back a second time. I answered. Audrey? The voice was sharp, male, and angry. This is Jared. Beatrice's boyfriend. You mind explaining why there is a mountain of some guy's crap stacked outside her door? I almost laughed out loud. The universe really did have a sense of humor. Jared, I said, my voice dripping with fake sympathy. I am so sorry you've been dragged into this. Why don't you ask Beatrice? Or Spencer? It sounds like they've been doing plenty of collaborating behind your back. That's not, she said he was having roommate trouble and she was just helping him out, he started, but I cut him off. Helping him out? Is that what she calls it? I said. Look, Jared, you don't know me, but I'm going to do you a favor. Spencer's iPad was still signed into my Wi-Fi this morning before I changed the password. He forgot to log out. I saw enough screenshots of his iMessage conversations with your girlfriend to last me a lifetime. We're talking months of this, Jared. Dinner plans, late-night chats, little heart emojis. I'd be happy to forward them to you if you'd like. Just give me your email address. There was a dead silence on the line, then a muttered curse before he hung up. I set my phone down, and I noticed something unexpected. My hands weren't shaking. For the first time in months, I felt completely, unshakably steady. Of course, I knew Spencer wouldn't let go easily. Men like him, men whose egos are as fragile as glass, never do. They don't see the end of a relationship as a sad event, they see it as a battle they lost. And they always want a rematch. I had a feeling, deep in my gut, that this was only the beginning. It was only a matter of time before Spencer himself called again, once he'd regrouped and come up with a new strategy. He called that afternoon. This time, his tone wasn't pleading. It wasn't angry. It was something far more twisted. It was smug. Rehearsed. Audrey, he began, his voice smooth as oil, like he was a CEO handling a minor PR issue. We need to talk. I think there's been a massive overreaction on your part. I stayed silent, letting him spin his web. It wasn't what you think, he said. It was a test. I actually let out a short, sharp laugh. I couldn't help it. A test? Are you serious right now? What was it a test of, Spencer? Your ability to lie straight to my face? No, he said, his voice dripping with condescension, like he was explaining a complex theory to a simple-minded child. It was a test of your love for me. A test of your passion. I wanted to see if you still cared. If you really loved me, you'd fight for me. You'd get jealous. You'd storm over there and make a scene. You'd show some passion. That's what women do when they care. You failed, Audrey. You didn't fight. You just gave up. It just proves you never really loved me. The audacity of it, the sheer, twisted logic of his gaslighting, almost stunned me into silence. Almost. He wasn't just trying to excuse his behavior, he was trying to blame me for my reaction to it. He was trying to rewrite the entire story to make me the villain. You wanted a dog, Spencer, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. Something loyal that would come running back no matter how many times you kicked it, wagging its tail, just happy to have you home. I'm not a dog. I don't chase. I replace. His voice cracked then, the smooth facade crumbling. Replace me? With who? He sputtered, the question laced with pure, pathetic disbelief. I let the pause hang in the air for a few delicious seconds. I hadn't planned on saying it, but the words just came to me, a perfect little weapon. Then I delivered the line like a dagger. I already texted Garrett. We're getting coffee tomorrow. The silence on his end was absolute. Garrett. He was a friend from my rock climbing gym, a genuinely good guy who Spencer had always, irrationally, accused me of liking too much. He called Garrett a threat just for existing in my orbit, for being friendly to me. The truth was, Garrett and I had never been more than friends. I hadn't actually texted him. But Spencer didn't need to know that. You wouldn't, he whispered, the sound raw with a mix of disbelief and wounded pride. Watch me, I replied, and I hung up the phone. That's when his campaign of terror truly began. By that evening, my phone lit up with alerts. Spencer had plastered his Facebook page with a long, rambling post. It was a masterpiece of victimhood, carefully crafted to win sympathy. I need to share my truth, it began. My ex Audrey is unstable. For months she has been controlling and emotionally abusive. Last night, she had a psychotic break and threw me out on the street with nothing for no reason. She is trying to ruin my life because she is insecure. Please, don't believe her lies. Pray for her. It was classic deflection. paint the victim as the aggressor. But I was prepared. I didn't engage with his post. I didn't write a long rebuttal. I didn't get into a slanging match in the comments. I simply took the screenshot I had saved on my phone, the one of his text message telling me he was staying at Beatrice's. I posted it in the comments section of his post. No caption. No explanation. Just the image. His own words, in black and white, timestamped for all the world to see. It was like dropping a bomb. The narrative he had so carefully crafted was vaporized in an instant. The comments started to turn. People started tagging Beatrice, asking if it was true. His own friends started messaging me privately. One of them wrote, "Audrey, I am so sorry. We always knew he was a jerk, but not like this. We're on your side." Another said, "I'm done with him. This is the last straw." Even one of my own friends, who had once defended him and told me I was being too hard on him, sent me a text. "I'm so sorry, Audrey. I was wrong. He's toxic. Stay strong." By nightfall, Spencer's post was gone. Deleted. But the damage was done, not to me, but to him. And still, he couldn't stop. At 2 a.m., another message came from him. This one was almost pitiful. I was setting up a future for us. Beatrice meant nothing. You'll regret leaving me. I was going to get a big promotion and a higher salary, and then we could have started our life. You threw away our future. I stared at the words, my jaw tightening. The lies were endless. He was a drowning man, flailing and grabbing at anything to pull me down with him. But deep in my gut, I knew this wasn't just the flailing of a desperate man. He was plotting his next move. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that men like Spencer don't go away quietly. The morning after his smear campaign fizzled out, I thought I'd finally get some quiet. I was wrong. At 9:15 a.m., as I was sipping my first cup of coffee in my blessedly peaceful apartment, my phone buzzed. It was a fraud alert from my bank. An attempted charge of $78.54 at the Daily Grind Cafe on your cancelled card ending in 1234 was declined. He had actually tried to use the card I had cancelled 2 days ago. The sheer nerve of it. He must have saved the number. 10 minutes later, another alert. This one was an email from a credit monitoring service I subscribe to. A new inquiry has been made on your credit report from Capital One Bank. I clicked through. Thank you for your credit application. Your request for a new credit card in the name of Audrey Cross is now under review. Spencer. He had my social security number, my date of birth, all my personal information. He was trying to open a line of credit in my name. My blood ran cold. This was no longer a messy breakup. This was a crime. This was a felony. I immediately called the bank's fraud department. I spent 30 minutes on the phone with a very helpful woman named Maria, who immediately canceled the application and placed a high-level security freeze on all my accounts. Then, I dialed the non-emergency police line. I spent the next hour on the phone with a very patient detective, explaining the entire timeline of events, from the breakup to the fraudulent application. I emailed him the screenshots of the fraud alerts and the credit inquiry. Attempted identity theft is a felony, Ms. Cross, the detective told me, his voice serious. He used your personal information to try and open a line of credit without your consent. We can open a formal investigation. Would you like to press charges? I'll think about it, I said, my voice shaking slightly. Though inside, I already knew the answer. The line had been crossed. By noon, the consequences of his actions began to multiply in ways I hadn't even anticipated. My LinkedIn profile pinged. Jonathan Mills, senior manager at TechCorp, has viewed your profile. Spencer's boss. A message followed shortly after. Hi, Audrey. Jonathan Mills here. Odd question, and I apologize for reaching out this way, but has everything been okay with Spencer lately? He listed you as his emergency contact, which is why I have your name. Also, we noticed a rather unusual salary advance request come through yesterday with your name mentioned as a justification for a family emergency. I took a deep breath and typed back a professional but firm reply. Hi, Jonathan. I appreciate you reaching out. To be clear, Spencer and I broke up 2 days ago after I discovered he was being unfaithful. He has not lived at this address since then, and there is no family emergency. I did not authorize any use of my name for financial requests. As for his well-being, you may want to check with his coworker, Beatrice, as he stayed overnight with her on Tuesday. I believe they've both been calling in sick since then. There was a pause, then a reply. Interesting coincidence. We have a very strict anti-fraternization policy here regarding employees in the same department. It's a fireable offense, designed to prevent exactly these kinds of messy situations. Thank you for your candor. This clarifies a lot. By 3 p.m., Spencer called from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but I'm glad I did. The fury in his voice was raw, unhinged. You got me fired, he screamed into the phone. No, I said calmly, my voice a stark contrast to his rage. You got yourself fired. You broke up our relationship, you lied to your boss, and you broke your company's rules. I just told the truth when I was asked. I wasn't dating her, he snapped. It was a mistake. Your boss seems to think otherwise, I replied. So does her boyfriend, by the way. I heard he had quite a chat with her after he found your mountain of belongings at her door. How am I supposed to live without a job? Without money, he demanded, his voice cracking with desperation. My career is over. What am I supposed to do? Maybe Beatrice can support you, I replied, my voice as sweet as poison. Oh, wait. I heard from a little bird that her position was also terminated this afternoon. What a shame. Maybe you two can look for jobs together. His rage spilled into a stream of incoherent curses before the line went dead. Later that evening, another call, this time from his mother, Brenda. Her voice was no longer sharp and accusatory. It was softer now, almost begging. Audrey, please. He's learned his lesson. He's a mess. He got fired. He has nothing. Don't press charges for this credit card thing. Please. You'll ruin his entire life. Think of his future. I pressed the phone closer to my ear, staring at the quiet, peaceful apartment around me, an apartment that was finally, truly free of his presence. Brenda, I said evenly. He tried to ruin my credit. He tried to steal my identity and put me into debt. He didn't think about my future then. He ruined his own life, one bad decision at a time. I'm just not going to carry the blame for it anymore. There was a long silence, then the sound of her muffled sobs before she hung up. For the first time since this all began, I felt something close to satisfaction. Not because Spencer's life was crumbling, but because the mask had finally, completely fallen off. Everyone else could see him now for what he was, a selfish boy who played games until he lost everything. Still, in the back of my mind, I knew. Cornered men rarely retreat. They lash out. And I had a sinking feeling that I hadn't seen the worst of Spencer yet. Saturday afternoon, I was in my kitchen making coffee when a deep, rumbling sound shook the street outside. I peered through the blinds and my blood ran cold. It was a U-Haul truck, parked crookedly at the curb right in front of my building, taking up 2 parking spaces. And then I saw him. Spencer. He wasn't alone. 2 of his cousins, guys I'd met a few times at family barbecues, climbed out of the cab. Cody and Shane. They were big guys, muscles flexing under cheap tank tops, the kind of guys you hire for intimidation, not for careful moving. Spencer strutted behind them like a general marching his army into battle. My heart didn't race. It settled into a low, heavy drumbeat. I had been waiting for this. I knew he was too arrogant to just walk away. This was his last stand. I immediately texted a group chat I'd made with my brother, Cole, and my best friend, Ramona. My message was simple, code red. U-Haul has arrived. Get here now. They both lived less than 10 minutes away. I got 2 thumbs up emojis back instantly. I opened my front door just enough to watch from the crack. I wasn't going to hide. This was my home. Cody was already at my front door, fiddling with the new lock with a screwdriver. Shane was hauling my patio chairs, the ones I bought last summer, toward the truck. Spencer just stood there on the sidewalk with his arms crossed, a smug smirk on his face like he'd already won. That smirk faltered when my front door opened wider. And my brother, Cole, stepped out to stand beside me. Cole is a big guy. He's broad-shouldered, a former college wrestler, the kind of man who can silence a room with just a look. He's the gentlest person I know, but you would not want to be on his bad side. He looked at the cousins, then at Spencer, and his expression was pure ice. Then, Ramona appeared on my other side, her phone already out and recording everything. "Hi, boys," she said cheerfully. "Big day for some illegal eviction, is it?" "Afternoon, gentlemen," Cole said, his voice dangerously cool. "Planning to rob my sister in broad daylight?" Cody froze, the screwdriver slipping from his hand and clattering on the welcome mat. Shane immediately put down the chairs like they were hot. Spencer's jaw tightened. "This is my place, too, Cole. I have rights. I lived here. Some of my stuff is still in there." "No, you don't," I cut in, my voice carrying louder and stronger than I expected. "Every last piece of your junk was delivered to Beatrice's door a week ago. I have pictures. You have no property here. You are trespassing." "That doesn't matter. My mail still comes here. I lived here for 8 months. I'm moving back in," he blustered, trying to puff out his chest. Ramona stepped forward, her camera steady in her hand. "You mean breaking and entering?" she asked sweetly. "Because that's what trying to force a lock is called. Pretty sure that does matter to the police." "Smile for the camera, Spencer." And then, as if the universe itself enjoyed a bit of theatrics, a familiar voice called out from the sidewalk. "Gentlemen. Is there a problem here?" We all turned. It was Officer Miller. His real name is Frank. He's a friend of my dad's from way back, and he'd become a sort of uncle to me and Cole over the years. I'd called him that morning, not the police line, and just gave him a heads up that my ex might cause trouble. I guess he decided to swing by on his patrol. He was in full uniform, and he flashed his badge, even though we all knew who he was. "Care to explain why you're attempting a burglary?" The cousins, Cody and Shane, went pale. Cody held up his hands and muttered something about being misinformed and that he thought they were just moving furniture. He started backing toward the U-Haul. Shane followed close behind, mumbling apologies. Spencer's composure finally cracked. His arrogant facade crumbled, and all that was left was desperation, bleeding through his arrogance. "Audrey," he pleaded, his voice high and strained as his backup abandoned him. "You can't do this to me. I have nowhere else to go. My mom kicked me out. I've been sleeping in my car." I folded my arms, steady as a stone. "You did this to yourself, Spencer. Every single choice you made led you right here, to this exact spot on my doorstep. But you love me," he shouted, his voice breaking. It wasn't a question. It was a demand. A last, desperate attempt to pull a string that had already been cut. "No," I said, and the truth of it resonated in my own ears, clear and strong. "I loved the man I thought you were. That man, I've come to realize, doesn't actually exist." Frank stepped closer, his hand resting casually on his belt. Spencer Harper, he said, his voice all business now. We've already got a police report for attempted identity theft in your name, filed 2 days ago. Care to add trespassing and attempted breaking and entering to the list? Spencer blanched. His eyes darted between all of us. Cole's glare. Ramona's phone. Frank's badge. He realized the battle was lost. The war was over. But he still tried to play one last, pitiful card. Audrey, please, he whimpered, tears welling up in his eyes. I can change. I know I messed up. I'll go to therapy. Just one more chance. I almost pitied him. For a split second, I saw the boy I used to love. But then I remembered the cold dread of reading that text message. I remembered the humiliation of his Facebook post. I remembered the chilling violation of the fraud alerts. You had your chance, Spencer, I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. You had it the night you chose Beatrice. You had it the night you tried to forge my name on a credit application. And you had it every single moment you chose to lie instead of telling the truth. The silence stretched on, thick and heavy. Finally, Frank pulled out his radio. Dispatch, I've got a suspect here matching the description from the 459B identity theft report. I'm bringing him in. That broke him. Spencer turned and bolted toward the U-Haul, but it was already pulling away from the curb. His own family had abandoned him. Frank caught his arm easily. Spencer didn't even resist. He just sagged, defeated. As they led him toward the patrol car, he twisted his head over his shoulder and screamed one last thing at me. You'll regret this, Audrey. You'll regret losing me. I stood there, holding the doorframe of my home, and I spoke clearly enough for the whole block to hear. No, Spencer. The only thing I'll regret is ever letting you in. The U-Haul disappeared down the street, and with it, the last of his power over me. The patrol car followed moments later. And then, silence. If you've listened this far, please do me a huge favor and like this video and comment the number 1 down below. It lets me know that you're amazing, and it tells me you've been right here with me on this whole journey. Your support is a massive encouragement for me. So please, comment with a 1 so I know you're here, and now, let me tell you what happened next. The week after Spencer's arrest was strangely, profoundly calm. It was like the air after a violent hurricane has finally passed. My apartment, which had once felt so heavy with his presence and the tension he created, suddenly felt light. The sunlight seemed to stream in more warmly. The silence was no longer suffocating, it was comforting. It was the sound of peace. I spent the first few days just being. I was relearning the simple pleasures of living alone. On Sunday morning, I made a full pot of coffee just for myself, without wondering if he'd drained the last of the beans without telling me. I sat by the window in my favorite armchair, the one he was always cluttering up with his jackets, and I read a book for 3 straight hours without interruption. That afternoon, I decided to rearrange the living room furniture. It was a physical act of reclaiming my space. I pushed the sofa to the other wall, moved the bookshelf, created a home that felt like mine and mine alone. As I worked, I played my music at full volume, all the sad, slow, folksy music he always called depressing, without his complaints. At night, I would stretch out diagonally across my entire bed, just because I could, without running into his restless, thrashing body. Freedom, I discovered, was quiet. And quiet was beautiful. Of course, there were still echoes of the storm. Brenda, his mother, left a few more voicemails. They oscillated wildly between begging me to drop the charges because I was ruining his chance at a good future and blaming me for her son's downfall. I listened to the first one, then I just started deleting them without listening. I owed them nothing. My debt of compassion had been paid in full, and it had been repaid with betrayal. I blocked her number. I blocked his cousins. I blocked anyone and everyone who was a part of his world. Then one evening, about a week later, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Garrett, the friend from the climbing gym. The one I had used to get under Spencer's skin. I'd actually texted him after that disastrous phone call to apologize, explaining that my ex was being manipulative and I was sorry for dragging his name into it. He'd been incredibly gracious about it, telling me not to worry and hoping I was okay. His new message was simple. Hey, hope things have calmed down. Wanted to see if you wanted to grab that coffee this week? No pressure. I stared at the text for a long moment. My chest tightened, but not with dread this time. It was a nervous flutter, something that felt a little bit like hope. A part of me wanted to say no, to retreat into my safe, quiet world forever. But another part, the part that had found the strength to pack up 8 boxes and change the locks, knew that I couldn't let Spencer's ghost dictate the rest of my life. I typed back, I'd love that. When we met, it wasn't dramatic. There were no fireworks, no cinematic soundtrack playing in the background. It was just nice. It was just 2 people sitting across from each other at a small table in a sunlit cafe, sipping coffee, laughing at small things. He asked me questions about my work, about my family, about my ridiculously nerdy love for old sci-fi novels. And he listened. He actually listened, his phone tucked away in his pocket, his eyes on me when I spoke. The simplicity of it, the sheer, unadulterated respect of it, felt more healing than I could have imagined. There was no talk of exes, no drama. Just a simple, human connection. We've taken it slow since then. Cautious, but steady. A few more coffee dates, a walk in the park, a trip to the climbing gym where he patiently taught me a new technique. And maybe, just maybe, I'm starting to let myself believe that real partnership exists. Not the kind built on smoke and mirrors and manipulation, but the kind built on a foundation of respect and honesty. One night, not too long ago, I was walking through my apartment, a glass of wine in my hand. I paused by the front door, the same door where Spencer had pounded his fists, screaming for entry. The wood is smooth again. I repainted it a cheerful shade of blue. The ghosts are gone. I thought of my father's words, the ones that felt like prophecy. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. It took me a while, and a lot of pain, but I finally did. Spencer showed me exactly who he was, a boy in a man's body who couldn't handle the consequences of his own actions. And I believed him. The very last text he ever sent me, right before the police took him away, was that threat, "You'll never find anyone like me." And as I stood there in my quiet, peaceful, blue-doored home, I smiled. Because he was right. I never will. And thank God for that. Thank you all so much for listening to my story. It means the world to me to be able to share it with you. If you've ever been through anything like this, or if this story resonated with you, please leave a comment down below. I read every single one. And don't forget to like and subscribe, because sharing our stories is how we remind each other that we're not alone. I'll see you in the next one. Bye now.